My name is Mateo. I'm currently a junior at CU Boulder who's studying international affairs and ethnic studies. I'm working with this organization called Sacred Voices that is in Denver, and it's a specifically started out as an organization for Indigenous youth, actually, to basically access poetry workshops. They also host a monthly open mic. So I basically started working on their board. So I'm helping them kind of like run the monthly open mics for Black, Indigenous, people of color every month.
Mm.
But then on the side of that, I've also been helping them do poetry workshops for high schoolers, teaching students like kind of basics about poetry, showing them some examples, and then like most importantly, writing. So just writing and then getting to share. So they get to write to prompts that have to do specifically with like their identity, their experiences, and kind of where they've grown up. And yeah, that's kind of what I've been working on. Yeah, I just, kind of took to it. I've always been into writing and stuff, and then got into poetry when I was like, yeah, like 11 years old. Because I had a writing teacher who is, ironically, her name was Miss Wright. But yeah, so yeah, she basically got me into it, right? Because she was super into, spoken word when she was in college, and basically like that's how I got my first taste of that. Was like I remember she had like basically like a poetry workshop that she was teaching like these sixth grade students, and I just happened to be one of them. And yeah, I got super into that, like really into that art form. Um, but I didn't really start getting into it like more, I guess, professionally until I was like 15. Because Denver has always had like a very like vibrant art scene, but also specifically spoken word poetry scene, because there's a lot of cafes and stuff you can go to. But so when I was 15, I got the opportunity to try out for the Denver slam poetry team, youth slam poetry team. At the time it was named Minor Disturbance. From there, basically, like, after you make the team, Minor Disturbance, like the organization, what they would do is like, you would be mentored by some older coaches and stuff that were really involved. A lot of them were really involved in the Denver scene as well, in some of the adult teams. I guess like the way I could describe it is almost like a residency, almost like
Yeah.
how people kind of apply for that, and then they're like, all right, go write in the cabin, like go write in a cabin in the woods for like 3 months, and then see what you bring out. That's basically what we did, because all of that was in preparation for an international competition, which was Brave New Voices. So that one is still around. Um, and so yeah, I just like really intensely like rehearsed and wrote for those 3 months. Like a lot of them really focused on your identity, where you come from, like basically any social message that you want to convey. So that's what we did. So we went to Brave New Voices, which at that point was in Washington, D.C. So I was 16 again, like, you know, that I guess that's kind of how I got into it. You know what I mean? Like you know, poetry gave me a lot of opportunities to travel, to meet new friends, to make like all of these now professional connections too. Like this is stuff that I'm doing now. And really kind of dip my toes into that. And I mean, I will say, like, besides that, one poetry workshop that I had when I was in sixth grade, I mean, I never had any writing class, like creative writing class after that in my charter education. So it's like, I just imagine like if I didn't have that one class like to teach me about poetry, like I would have never done that, like I don't even know. It's like hard to tell, because I made some of my best friends on that team. I had some of my first, traveling experiences on that team, and being from a low income community myself, and being brown, like you don't get a lot of opportunities to do that stuff, right? Like you don't just have the money to do that, because all of that stuff was like, I got the paid opportunity to go and like compete at this international festival and meet all these people. Um, Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to access that. So yeah, that's kind of a little bit about how I got into poetry and all of that. Whenever I talk about this, like, I feel like there's like these moments in your life that, if they didn't happen, like would have completely changed kind of like the trajectory of where you were going. And honestly, like me getting involved with minor disturbance and getting involved with poetry was one of those moments, really. Um, and I don't say that lightly, you know. I think like there's very few opportunities that you have in life that really can like shape the person that you are. But yeah, I would say like poetry, getting involved with that. I think in a lot of ways it did do a lot for my personal development and growth as a person. You know, I was going through a lot of stuff when I was in middle school, you know, when I was first getting into poetry, and a lot of like really personal battles with like depression and stuff like that. And then also just, you know, again, growing up like, you know, Latinx, but also growing up, you know, you know, family's first generation, my parents are Mexican immigrants, right? So, you know, I was really just trying to make sense of the world. Um, that was like, you know, the world was very political, right? Like my very existence was very political in a lot of these spaces. Um, but like, you know, when I was like 11, you know, 12, 13, I mean, you don't really have access again to a lot of tools and things to kind of deal with your emotions if you're dealing with depression and stuff like that, especially if you are more marginalized. So, I mean, really, like, you know, poetry really saved my life, to be honest. It really gave me the opportunity to actually critique the world around me, but also to articulate my own place within the world. um and yeah, you know, just having that whole developmental experience as well, like for me, like in terms of my personal growth, like it actually showed me like, no, like regardless of the things that I'm going through, like I am good at this, right? Like I am good at this like craft, and I can get better at that, and this can actually take me places. You know, that was not something that I knew beforehand. um and yeah, you know, I had always been into like activism and stuff like that, like social justice. But this was just a completely different take. You know, I feel like it's so different just learning, you know, theory and learning about social justice as opposed to literally practicing it. I consider like spoken word poetry to be like an exercise in that, you know, how you reflect on the world and what you put out there and how you unite others like through your experiences and your words. So yeah, to put it lightly, I mean, it changed my life. You know, a lot of, you know, students of color in particular, you know, who are in these more like low income areas, and these very STEM focused like charter schools and stuff like that, just don't get access to like that kind of curriculum. It's the first curriculum to be cut. Like that's the first thing that goes is arts curriculum. And to me, that's, you know, that's really missing the mark, because it's like, you know, like these, yeah, like on the one hand, like these students are getting like all of this education, um and you know, reading and math are important, don't get me wrong, like I think that's true, but they're also not getting these subjects in order to be able to articulate their place in the world. You know, like they're not getting that opportunity to reflect on, you know, what does it mean for me to be, you know, like a brown or black person, like who is growing up in this time, especially in these very political times that we're in. They don't get the time, like the opportunity in their 8 hour school day to actually like answer that question for themselves. And art is one of the, I mean, it's a very human aspect, you know. um, yeah, a very human aspect of our lives. And if they don't get the opportunity to do that, I fear that they're missing out on a lot of emotional and social growth that they otherwise could potentially have. But I do know that, you know, for the students that I work with or that I hope to work with in the future, like even just that one class can make a big difference, you know. But yeah, that's kind of about that. Basically, like what I've learned is that like students really pick up on like a lot of your energy, right? So like the good and the bad. I feel like a lot of educators underestimate a lot of youth, and they underestimate their potential. And that comes out, you know, like students can tell like when you're underestimating their ability. Um, and you know, in particular, what I've really learned is just to trust them and trust the process. And the best way that I'm going to be an effective like workshop facilitator or instructor or anything like that is really by taking my cues from them. So I have to be very in tune with like how they're experiencing things, and you know, like for example, when I'm formatting my writing prompts, right? Like I think, even like when I'm crafting curriculum, there's like a specific way that you're supposed to, I guess, like craft like creative writing curriculum. And sometimes I have to adjust that a little bit, right? The purpose of this for me is not primarily academic, is kind of what I'm trying to get at. Like what I'm really trying to do is like inspire like my students with the prompts, right? I want them to feel, I don't want them when they look at a prompt to be like, what is this asking me to do? And like, how do I problem solve to get there? It's like, no, I want them to look at a prompt and feel like they want to write something, right? Like that's kind of what I've kind of like picked up. So in order to do that, again, like I just have to be very mindful of like how I word things and how I present things. Especially because I think a lot of students like have developed this relationship with poetry and like with writing, where they only understand it, or have seen it presented to them really in an academic way, and not so much the creative aspect. So I really learned that pretty much. And then let's see, as to where I want to take it, I want there to be more accessible arts education curriculum for low income youth, whether that's through like nonprofits. In the future, I really do feel like it should be like really like a ballot measure or something, to literally get this like into school curriculums as a requirement. Something that can't be gutted. Um, but yeah, similar to how people really want, for example, ethnic studies to be a part of the core curriculum. I mean, I feel like arts education, even from that lens, like I think you can play around with that. I think that would be amazing. But yeah, specifically with my work with Sacred Voices, I would like to develop at least some sort of model for them to have like consistent, poetry workshops for as many, high school students as want them, and need them. Um, and yeah, whatever form that takes, because I think there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. But yeah, um, I mean, I actually got this opportunity to start teaching workshops during the quarantine, um, like, through Sacred Voices. So ideally, like it would have been great if I would have been able to teach these workshops like in person, right? On the one hand, trying to establish relationships with students that you've never met before, like physically. And then on the other hand, just like, trying to teach your regular sort of curriculum, right? Like your poetry curriculum. So that's kind of like it's been challenging, but I think like I've been the way I've been handling it, I mean, I think it also just presents an opportunity as well. That's kind of the way that I've kind of looked at it, right? Like the fact that, I get to do this, and I get to kind of, um have a bit of like I get to think a little bit more about this, in terms of how I can make things the most accessible. For example, like with my slides and stuff, right? Like when I first accepted this opportunity like to teach workshops at New America School, um I wasn't as like familiar, for example, with how to make my curriculum, which was mostly English, like accessible to students who mostly speak Spanish or who are still learning English, right? And luckily, like I am bilingual, but but I'm also trying to get better at speaking Spanish itself. So this kind of gave me that opportunity where like, I'm like teaching my students and stuff, and it's kind of like we're learning from each other. But so for example, like I started translating every slide, so every slide has everything in English and everything in Spanish, including like all the core concepts we're learning and the prompts, right? Like most importantly, it's the prompts, because if like sometimes you'll have it be this thing where you'll write something in Spanish or something in English that makes sense, but you have to kind of interpret it a little bit more when you're writing it in Spanish to get to the exact thing that you want to get to. So that's been a little bit of a learning curve for me, um, but I mean, again, like I think it's just another opportunity to kind of grow and to expand the way that I teach and the way that I, craft this curriculum. An Ode to Federal Boulevard. In a study by the Denver Public Works, 408 people were asked to describe Federal Boulevard, the street that I grew up along. Responses would be used to generate an urban development plan for the surrounding area, to be implemented in the coming years. Among the most popular responses were congested, dirty, ghetto, and unsafe. This is my response. An ode to Federal Boulevard. To your concrete exterior under shadeless sky, your wrinkled asphalt worry lines and chipped paint refusing rejuvenation, potholes that demand attention. Ode, yes, even, to that crazy intersection off of Morrison Road, with the crooked lanes and the blinking eye, to streets too small for trucks so grand, for lowriders bumping too close to the earth. Ode to graffiti and murales mexicanos, to tag artists who work best under the cloak of night and without permission, who taught me how to make a rose bloom from concrete, how to raise revolution while the world is sound asleep. Ode to fathers who slip from porch doors before sunrise to file in the unemployment line, to mothers tucking kids in bed before the graveyard shift because la familia es lo más importante, family is the most important thing. Ode to the RTD bus line running until midnight, with the still broken ticket machine letting passengers in for free, for the bus stop squatters and the old ladies who give them change, teaching me how much $1 really costs. An ode to Vietnamese pho and taco trucks on every corner, thriving community defying any business model, to Little Mexico and Little Saigon for always keeping me fed, to the migrant construction workers and business owners who built this barrio from the ground up, who teach that pride and authenticity cannot be feigned, to the paleteros y eloteros who scale Federal's sloped back, to the neverias de Chihuahua, Juarez y Michoacan, serving cool nostalgia beneath a boiling sun, sweetness that can only mean home. An ode to Sunday night drag races, DPD's hottest night of the week, where Mercado parking lots become car shows and corridos y banda blast like gospel. Brown boys driving fast flash smiles bright as rims, give police sirens a run for their money. To the beggars on Alameda, and the jaywalkers tempting fate, this is an ode to ghosts. To Our Lady Guadalupe, who guides car accident victims in the light of veladoras, to wilted marigold and rose bouquets that are never swept away. I, driver's permit fresh in hand, cruise slowly beneath neon signs wagging their nagging fingers. Slow down, 9 traffic deaths in 2017, drive drunk and go to jail. They think we are stray dogs who can't stop running into our own deaths. Federal, how many unnamed children do you hold in your outstretched arms? I want to give the 5 police officers harassing a homeless man on Florida a neon sign. I want to give the 4 police officers who tackled a 15-year-old on Mississippi a neon sign. I want to give the police officer who killed Paul Castaway on Morrison Road a neon sign. Federal, you couldn't shield my eyes from life's hardest lessons. How to create memorials. I must write odes in place of eulogies. The golden cranes from Northside are moving in on your tarred feet. You're getting a makeover, new sidewalks and a paint job to match. They think that they can pave away your history, but I will always remember. An ode to Federal Boulevard, the street with the most heart in the Queen City of the Plains, for always guiding me home. Thank you. I guess I'll just say, to all the Puksta scholars out there, si se puede, you know? Don't underestimate yourself. Don't underestimate what you can do, and just build those connections with others, because you're only gonna, be able to accomplish whatever your project is aiming to do with other people.